Well, for reaction to Mr. B's appearance at Chatham House, I have two guest commentators with me for the rest of the program who are also going to give us their personal take on some of the other news and issues of the day. And they are the journalist, political affairs commentator, and Arise News analyst, Dr. Constance Ikokwu, and the policy strategist, Arise News analyst, and founder and executive director of Agora Policy, Waziri Adio. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. Let me start with you, Waziri. What's your assessment of Mr. B's appearance at Chatham House today? I presume you kind of watched his his speech and all the rest of it, and the interaction.
I did. I think it was a good performance, very good performance. And also when you compare it to, as John said, when you compare it to the one by the presidential candidate of APC, you could see the contrast. And, you know, a lot telegraphed, you know, and a lot in terms of optics, you know, he stood up throughout. He didn't delegate the questions. He answered the questions himself, you know. And he spoke on almost all the issues, and he hit the right points. So it's a good performance. The only thing for me is that, and it's not peculiar to him, and I've said this many times before, but you know, the obedience don't like you to say anything against their candidate. I will say it all the same. But it's not about him. This is something I've seen, not just in this electoral cycle, but over time. Our politicians do not speak to specifics. They speak in broad terms, right? So when you say, oh, you know, we're going to declare, you know, war on electricity, on the electricity sector, on the power sector, what does that mean? What exactly does that mean? If you say, you know, you look at what India and Indonesia have done with health sector, we are going to learn from them. What does that mean for Nigeria, right? You know, and so many other things. When you say we're going to make the country more secure, we're going to make the country more inclusive, you know, the government more inclusive and all of that. People like me were interested in specific details. What exactly are you going to do? That is what the policy discuss. But I also understand that, you know, because of the nature of campaigns, sometimes you don't want to get too bogged down, and you speak in general terms, what they call the poetry of campaigns, you know, but governance is not poetic. It's very prosaic. And the best time,
at this crucial time in Nigeria,
when we're faced with all kind of challenges.
Right.
Because all of them will be talking about the same things, right? About security, about the economy, you know, and so many other challenges facing us. What should make the difference is, you know, what proposal are you bringing, and how is that different, and how is that appropriate, you know, to what ails us as a country? That's
a good point. So let me come to you, Dr. Constance Ikokwu. First of all, he answered all the questions that he was asked. Is that something you see as positive, as Waziri Adio said, or is he old-fashioned in the sense that he has not displayed the modern sense of teamship that another candidate cited in farming out his questions to his aides?
He has to answer the questions, because in this election, he's projecting himself as a different candidate. He's projecting himself as different from the old guard or the old breed. So he cannot come to a world stage and not answer the questions. I watched the speech and the question and answer session, and towards the end of his speech, he did say something that is powerful. He said, you cannot, no, he said, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come.
Yes, I heard that when he said it.
And he got a standing ovation after that. He did touch on broad thematic areas, generally like what Waziri said. But when you listen to him, you see clearly a man on a mission. You see a man speaking from strong convictions, and you can see that his convictions seem to be rooted in his experiences as a governor, as a businessman, as a well-traveled African, and someone who really wants to bring about change in Nigeria. And therefore, his actions, whatever he's doing today, informs, his experiences inform his actions today. He's running for the highest office in the land. And he tells you again and again, this is what I'm going to do. So when he touched on the broad thematic areas, whether it's education, health, Nigerian unity, security, working on the economy, he did delve into some details, Waziri. He talked about how many megawatts of electricity we should be generating, year by year.
Yeah, but Waziri's point is not the issue of identifying how much you're going to generate.
Right.
It's how you're going to generate.
Right.
How you're going to transform the system enough for that to happen. And granted, there may not have been enough time in those kinds of sort of places. That's why they've got manifestos, I guess, so you can get into more detail with that. But finish the point you were making anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like he also said, some of them do not want to get into specific details because they think their opponents might steal them. He has said before during his campaign, I'm not holding forth for him, I'm just explaining that he has traveled to other countries like Egypt and seen what they have done with electricity, and some of those things we can also do in Nigeria. So anyway, at the end of the day, this is a man, you get a sense that he's going somewhere. Whether he will win is another issue entirely.
There was a sense of conviction.
Right.
Let me come to you, Waziri. Having said all this, I mean, you talked about optics and the importance of that and perception and so on. Do you think it put him in a better light and won him plaudits? Because the bottom line is votes in Nigeria, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I like, John said, in answer to your question about why Chatham House, why is everybody going to Chatham House? By the way, it's good for Chatham House. It's good for their brand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
An election happening in a former colony of the UK, and everybody is
trooping
here to, and where are they trooping to? They are trooping to Chatham House. I think it's good. It's good for the optics and for the journalists, for the international community, for all those people who want to have a sense of who are the candidates and what can we make of what is going on in Nigeria. But whether that would substantially affect the votes in Nigeria, I'm not too sure. I'm not saying it won't, but the votes are not in Chatham House, the votes are not in the UK, they are not in the US, the votes are here. And whether, if you have some people who are still undecided, that's if truly they are undecided, some of those people might be decided based on performances like this. But my sense is that 6 weeks to the election, I don't think there are many people who are undecided. And even if there are, I don't think that constituency is that big. And let me clarify that. Yes, there are some polls that say that, there are some significant, there's a significant chunk of the population, of the voters that are undecided or that do not wish to disclose their preferences. My sense is that, as is happening with polling all over the world, the respondents gave me the pollsters. People will decide what they want to tell you and whether they feel comfortable enough to tell you. But my own considered reasoning now is that I think by and large, most Nigerians have decided, and I don't, except there's any major critical event, I don't think there's anything that will change the minds of most voters now. There might still be a small group, but I don't think that group is big enough to change the outcome of the election.
Okay, is that how you see it?
Well, it might be. But again, when you look at the candidates and what they've been saying throughout the campaigns, I think, yes, it might be that a lot of people have made up their mind. I go back to what he said today, a few takeaways, for instance. You can see he's talking about government or governance not being for jokers. It's a serious business. Secondly, governance should be run, or government should be run as a business and not as a patronage system as we do today. He spoke on ethnic tensions and national unity. Those things are caused by marginalization, exclusion, people feeling they're not part of the system. Once you deal with those issues, all of those things sort of disappear or are gradually reduced. So these are issues that people feel in their lives every day. And when you get a candidate that is talking about, it seems like he's going to deal with them, he was very emphatic, very, very emphatic, and he appeared like someone who will be decisive in his actions or in his decisions in government. So yeah, a lot of people might have made up their mind. Well, you never can tell. Nigerian politics,
right?
It has its ways, and things can happen. And some people might decide to change their position or their support at the last minute.
Right. And Waziri, he talked about a very interesting thing about the issue of the National Assembly and legislators, and the fact that if he becomes president, he will not have a majority in Parliament, and therefore many of his policies may not be passed. His response to that was that as governor of Anambra State, he did not have a majority in the State Assembly, but he got his policies through because he was seen as being on the right path of rectitude and doing the right thing for the greater good. Is that a good answer? Is that a plausible answer?
No, it's as answers go, it's a good answer. But whether that squares with reality is a different thing. But I think it was very practical enough in terms of the fact that his party, if he wins, his party, might not have the majority in the parliament because, his party, the Labour Party, of course, is riding mostly on him rather than the spread of candidates that they put on in different parts. But if you go back to the history of politics in Nigeria, there are different things we can take away from that. The first one is that sometimes our politicians follow the ruling party. So it's possible that apart from being convinced about him and the rightness of his cause and they believe in him, you can see people, if he actually wins, you can see people crossing over. There's this proverb that the goat follows the man with the palm front. That's the way our politicians behave. That's the first thing. The second thing is also that people can also become very partisan, that each political party, they're just holding down their position, and like they have in the US, like the Republicans will vote as a bloc, the Democrats will vote as a bloc. Sometimes you have some people who will stray. The other part is that you can have a coalition, right? Yes, the parties will still keep their positions, but they can work together. And what that means
on issues,
not just on issues, but also you do some kind of give and take. Let's go back to 1979. 1979 is my default, for in 1979, the ruling party was MPN, right? But they didn't have the majority in the parliament to be able to ensure that the ministers will be approved by the parliament, to ensure that all the policies of the government will be passed by the parliament. What did they do? They traded the deputy senate president to MPP. They gave the speaker of the house to MPP, and they gave some ministerial positions to MPP. Despite that it was MPN that was the ruling party. So it's when it happens, there's a lot in our history that we can
there
dip
trade-offs that could happen.
But
let me ask you this, Dr. Ikokwu. There was a very interesting interview earlier with Bukola Saraki, who was on the morning show, Arise morning show, and he was talking about, he spoke very forcefully and very convincingly on behalf of his candidate, Atiku Abubakar, and he was talking about the fact that there are seminal policies that he has, such as restructuring and all the rest of it. And he was posing the same question. How is Peter Obi going to get these things through? But I wonder what you think, because, but the question I would have asked him if I was sitting there with him interviewing him is, you guys talk about, in one breath, wanting to work on behalf of Nigeria. Why wouldn't you do something that is a seminal policy of yours? Why? If you're in agreement with Peter Obi, for example, or whoever, that restructuring is a good thing, and that's a cardinal policy of the PDP. Why can't they get together in Parliament and say, yeah, let's move this forward? It doesn't matter who the president is. Why would you hold that up?
Charles, that's a very good point, working across aisles for the good of the nation. So indeed, if you're a politician that wants Nigeria to do well, you would step out of your corner, like the YPP candidate said, and work with the opponent, because you're serving Nigeria, you're not serving yourself. But Peter Obi is a very persuasive person. He's a very convincing person, and he is believable. He did it in Anambra State. Yes, Anambra is very small, tiny state. This is Nigeria we're talking about. But when you remember when he was governor for 8 years, he fought so many battles, nobody believed that he would survive them. In Anambra, they call him rock, Okute. Okute means rock. Anybody who underestimates that man does that at his own peril. If he does win this election, it is a beginning. It will be difficult. My sense is that somehow he will pull it off. I mean, the first year will probably be difficult. People will want to undermine him. There will be problems, existential problems here and there. Having said that, he's going for this. He believes in this. If he has decided to run for the highest office, knowing that Labour Party is not as popular as it should be, and knowing that he's a sort of a candidate, the new candidate, I think he believes that he will really do well when he gets into office.
Right.
How that pans out, we're going to see. It will be a challenge, but just remember that this man is a man of conviction.
Sure. Okay, we've got about a couple of minutes left, Waziri. The other big issue which the candidate who was sitting where you're sitting, of the YPP, Malik Ado Ibrahim, talked about was insecurity.
Does that make me a future candidate?
Well, I would vote for you. He talked about the attack on his father's palace, but also the searing last few days for the CUPP spokesman, Ikenga Egochinyere, and his political machine, which was attacked on Saturday in Imo State. His uncle and 2 others killed in that attack. Possibly the worst thing that they've been through in the course of this election campaign. I mean, you've done big studies and big reports on the state of insecurity. What do you make of the way things are and what he said?
I think the developments are very concerning. And, we need the security forces to stay on top of things. We have assurances, but assurances are not enough. The taste of the pudding is in the eating, right? So, especially as we're moving towards the election, and especially now, it's not just that we have what you can call generalized insecurity in Nigeria. We cannot afford to add political violence to it. Otherwise, that will be the tipping point. But it's not just the security forces themselves. It's also all of us. We have to make sure that we make this work. We need to have a country before we can make progress, right? So the politicians themselves, they need to check themselves. They need to check their followers. And the rest of us also need to intervene. Sometimes when the politicians get carried away and they want to get this at all costs, we have to tell them, no, this is our country. It's not just about you, it's about our country. So the civil society, the media, the security forces, the politicians, the international community, we all need to ensure that the elections hold, they hold in a secure and safe environment, and they are free, credible, and and fair.
Okay, we've got less than a minute. A final word from you.
Final word, we're looking forward to the elections. We hope that it holds, and all the promises that the candidates have made, we hope that they also keep the promises, and that we have a bipartisan sort of country or Congress or Parliament.
Thank you very much indeed. And that is, of course, Arise News analyst, political affairs commentator, journalist, Dr. Constance Ikokwu, and the policy strategist, Arise News analyst, and founder and executive director of Agora Policy, Waziri Adio. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of Arise Primetime. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and London. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.